unveiled an original Vimy monument that preceded the one that actually exists there today, which was just a little small thing with a cross on top of it to sort of commemorate the Canadian deaths there. And he did that in 1918, so pretty much right. Well, actually, it was before the war ended. It said February 1918, so pretty early on.
Yeah, Lachlan, go for it.
After going through the whole exhibit, my initial realization would be that one's life who isn't a soldier in a invaded country, life doesn't stop or cease to function properly. Because I saw a photo where there was a wedding happening in a church that was partially destroyed. And I was just kind of like, oh, they still live on normally.
Fair.
Somewhat.
Close enough.
I was talking with Owen and Mark on the way down here actually about Hitler visiting Vimy in June of 1940, talking about potentially bombing it because of what it meant to people that weren't German people on his now land when he was occupying France. And they never ended up doing that, but the government didn't find out until 1944. So that whole time they thought that Hitler may have actually gotten rid of the Vimy monument, which is crazy.
I have one. I have a really difficult time picturing magnitudes of numbers, and one thing that I thought was really interesting was the right above the exit to the second theater, there was names scrolling up, and it said that it would take 23 hours to scroll through all of the names of the deceased from World War II. And so it scrolled, and it was set on it. I think it was 23 hours and 10 minutes.
Holy. That's just for one war.
World War I.
Or two.
Two.
Someone else doesn't share something?
It kind of just struck me when I was just in the museum, the kind of reality of how family members who fought in the war and some who died, I've never met them, but I kind of felt a connection to them that I never had before, kind of just looking at things.
Yeah, I think so. Kieran?
Just the whole, like, I didn't realize before this point, like, how kind of dire this D-Day was and how, like, important it was, because, like, they only had one real option, which was to send troops. I mean, they could have sent troops onto these beaches. I mean, they could have sent troops to Siberia to fight on the Eastern Front, but that's not feasible at all. And it just, like, it was kind of like their only option and their last gamble, really.
This is not necessarily related specifically to this, but when we were at the graveyard earlier and at the other graveyard, I noticed that there's so many that, like, are unknown and they don't know who they are. And there was a lot more than I thought there'd be.
Absolutely. So we know this person died, but we could never connect it to his body that was buried somewhere in one of these grave sites all over France.
The family doesn't get reconciliation because they don't know.
There's a family somewhere still today that
doesn't know where their son is, or whatever is buried.
I'd love to hear two more thoughts.
All right, I can give you one.
Okay, two more including Mr. Vandermeer.
Excluding?
Yeah.
Or including?
Excluding.
Oh, the political pressure to not join the Second World War I found most striking, to see the resistance in supporting what was going on over here, at first by the US and Canada. They made a mention of the Canadian Prime Minister actually meeting with Hitler maybe in 1939 at some point, indicating that, yeah, Nazism's better than fascism, so they're doing okay over there, basically.
But Nazism is fascism.
Slight change. You'll learn about it in social studies.
You'll get there.
yeah, that's how they did.
It is interesting, that whole appeasement piece, right? That I know we've talked about with some of you before, that many of the European countries, Canada included, don't worry, Hitler's fine, Hitler's fine. Oh, Hitler's not really fine anymore.
Hitler's not fine. He's never fine.
Kate, I'd love to hear what you have to say, Karen, but I'm still looking for 2 more people after Karen.
Can I point some out that I thought was very cool? Graham and Curtis actually had, I think, the same one. They put it in slightly different words, but I really thought theirs was interesting. I really was interesting.
So I'll give you 30 seconds while Karen talks.
I think it was interesting.
Like the whole appeasement issue. I didn't realize that like going through like I thought they just like how they basically just gave him Czechoslovakia when he was kind of annexing it off, and the main reason was because they didn't want to start another war.
Yeah.
But in the end, it didn't really do much.
We also had 2 more over here, Jared and Penn.
Oh, whoa. Kate, let's go gentleman here, and then Jared and Penn.
We just read about these 2 brothers that like both like wanted to go into a war, and then they were like administered like, and they were separated kind of, and then they just by chance like were like in the same like troop or something, I don't know what to call it, but platoon or whatever, with each other, and then they both were digging trenches for like the front lines, and like digging them for protection against like enemies and stuff. And it was just reading about how since they found each other and how hard the war was for them before, and like how finding each other made it easier, and like how there's a story about how they both got trench foot and like both had to help each other, and like they both almost died of it because that was like a common thing. Yeah.
And that was for World War I.
I think so.
Easy. Jared, Penn?
What? I'll do it. So I think that I didn't really get the full scope of the victims of the things. There was I think it was testimony that, like, after the war, they went back to visit some friends they had. They said that they could stay in their home, but they had no food because the Germans had taken all of it, and it just didn't have anything. As well as the injured victims of the war. Farmer had an artificial leg, but he had to keep working, and they said that his leg would bleed because he's working so hard.
Jared?
Like, again, with the whole scale of numbers thing, like, you don't even need to know, like, how massive it was, like, to have a sense of the tragedy, although you kind of, like, it's kind of useful. Like, when we went to, like, some grave sites earlier, like, each one of them had, like, 100 or so soldiers in them. Larger ones had, like, maybe 1,000 tops. Like, the fact that this is just a tiny, minuscule, barely even visible dent in the total amount of people that have died in this war is just mind-boggling. Like, it's a massive amount of people. Like, 50 million. This is not even a dent. This is microscopic.
Any last words? So I think for me, what I take away from a lot of this is when we look back at our concept of nationalism. And the critical person that I am, I know that the government under Stephen Harper really made a push for a large chunk of Canadian nationalism to fall under our military history. And so this is, I think, a piece that we learn about and that is important to who we are as a nation. Do I think it's the only piece? Absolutely not. I think there's other things that are part of who we are. But this is an important one to understand and see how we made a name for ourselves as a very small nation. So I'm really glad that you guys have been able to see some of those steps and be here to appreciate that, because if you looked at the very end of that Vimy presentation, it talked about remembrance and commemorating and how do we actually hold that and keep that moving forward. And so things like this and you guys actually being here helps with that. Okay. Are there any last words?
I just have one logistical thing to talk about.